Okay, so hi, I'm Kaylee Scanlon, and I'll be the facilitator tonight. So this is discussion four, and the first question I'm going to ask is, how would you prove the need for high or low tech AAC devices for a student?
Um, I would approach it on the level of having someone else go through a day and not be able to communicate and see how they feel and how they're not able to get their thoughts across or be able to just have a conversation with another person so that they can get an idea of what it feels like for the child that is nonverbal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like having them go through what it actually feels like not being able to like communicate and see how it makes them feel. And also like with this course, just being able to watch a lot of videos, like showing, like those individuals' videos and letting them be able to see like what like success stories like come about it and not that kind of a sense, just to kind of like show them that everybody deserves a voice.
Yeah, I agree. And how you mentioned the video, I'm just thinking about Vanessa in her two videos. Her parents said that she would just take them by the hand and lead them around the house and point to the refrigerator and point to the things she needed. So it was obvious that she couldn't use her own voice to do that. So therefore, she needed some kind of assistive technology to help her have a voice. And then once she had that, it was obvious how much of a help it was and how much she was able to say once she had a different mode of speaking.
I have two students right now who are nonverbal, and they started out with low tech, and both parents, one completed his set process and one's in the process of completing hers. And the outcome of the male student who finished his, like, mom and dad are like, he doesn't take us to the fridge anymore, like you said, like pointing to anything, like he can scroll through pages. And then, you like made the right decision on picking that high tech device for them. Okay. So then how would you approach school principals, parents, superintendents, insurance companies, and other professionals who are strongly against the use of AAC devices in order to justify the purchase and or use of AAC devices with your students?
I feel like just like giving them all the resources, how we are in the class, like you guys said, like watching the videos, because really that's the way that they're going to learn how it's needed. Recommending to read the books, like the book that we had to read, Out of Your Mind, just understanding that the girl in the book, needed her AAC device to be able to show that she was intelligent. And it would, again, like giving them like situations where if they weren't able to speak or talk about what they wanted or answer a question or be able to show how intelligent they are, how they would feel in that area. And yes, it's expensive, but at the same time, you can't put a price on giving someone the ability to communicate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like that. You can't put a price on the chance for them to like communicate, because I think we take it for advantage so easily. Like they have no opportunity, and then they're kind of in a world where they're just like mute and they can't say anything. I also thought about the IQ. Like, I mean, we had no clue that Melody was so intelligent like the rest of the world until she was able to communicate her like thoughts, especially when it came to like switching from her low tech to like her high tech. You could even see the change in all the vocabulary words and the sentences that she could form. So like just having them go through like the real life situations and think about like, like what somebody may be going through, and just really proving to them like it's important, and just trying to stay as positive as possible about it.
I agree. And I definitely think, like you said, Megan, a good way would just to show them situations or success stories. Like the Penn State page that we had to view with all those videos of success stories. I mean, if that's not proof enough, I mean, some of those children, they were babies and they were able to speak and participate in games and communicate even earlier than non-disabled babies are able to start communicating. So if that's not enough right there to prove that it's a benefit and that certain students are going to need this, then I don't know what else would be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like fortunately I've had really like success stories with my principal being on board, my supervisor being on board whenever I recommend anything. But I feel like if I had an experience where someone wasn't on board, then I would make sure that like during our set process that, you know, I trained that PCA to take really extensive data in order to validate why this is important and which device works, which route's working, why sign language may not be enough, which is one of my kids is going through right now. Like it's not helping her at this point. So we need something more. So have you guys had experiences, negative or not?
I had a situation really similar to yours, Kaylee, with a sign language. I had a student in my classroom, and I teach life skills. So most of my students are speaking with their voice. So assistive technology is something a little more new for me. But he is deaf. So he has a cochlear implant, and he would communicate primarily with sign language. However, he didn't start learning sign language like from birth. So he started learning it, you know, 4th, 5th grade, which is such a long gap to start learning it. So he really honestly wasn't fluid in it. Most
Were
of
they
it.
adaptive signs or were they?
No, it was American
It
Sign
was,
Language.
okay. See, we're having the problem with their adaptive ASL. So, I mean,
Okay.
we know what she's talking about, but, you know,
Sure.
put her in a community, no one has any idea what she's saying.
Right. My student, I mean, he does use sign language, but it's like one sign where it's not fluid signing whole sentences. It's one sign. And then maybe like if he doesn't know the sign for it, he would just gesture. And unless you know sign language, you don't have a clue what he's talking about. So our speech therapist ended up using Proloquo with him and
Okay.
introducing it. And at first, when it was introduced to his parents were not for it. They weren't even for sign language at first. They wanted him to speak, and it was very difficult to help them to understand that speaking for him is going to be very hard because he was born deaf and he doesn't know what spoken language sounds like. So they wanted him speaking. They were okay with the sign language, but it took a little bit of push to get them to understand that, you know, out in the community where he's not in the deaf community, people who don't speak sign language are not going to be able to communicate with him and understand. So that was enough to kind of get them to realize, you know, Proloquo would be great. And it's not that we stopped sign language. He still uses sign language, but he also has Proloquo to use with his peers and his teachers who don't know sign language, because he's not always going to have his translator with him to help.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is like always accepting, you know, what they were before, what they were using, and then transitioning into that, not just eliminating and cutting it all off.
Right.
Gina, since you teach kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
And kindergarten, have you had any experiences with kids with AAC devices in your classroom?
No, we haven't had anything like that. Like not even it throughout like our whole entire like school. There wasn't
Okay.
any students that used it. So it was like really interesting for it to be as new. I mean, like we integrate like a little bit of sign language, but in reality, it's nothing compared to kids that have to use like AAC devices. It's just a way to keep them like answering and, you know, dynamic in a different way. So.
And then Megan, what have your experiences been?
I really have limited experience. So like this class is kind of like eye-opening for me. I teach at a Catholic school, kindergarten. So resources, you know, aren't there. Money is an issue, you know, so I've had limited. My cousin actually, he has Down syndrome and he uses the Proloquo. I haven't seen him use it, but I find it interesting because I was talking to his mom and he uses it at school, but he doesn't use it at home, which I find interesting because they really say that you have to for it to be really effective, you have to use it both at home and in school so they're able to communicate a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, see, I've had the experience with that kid who just completed the set process that mom said they were like expecting it to be not used at home. And then like the minute it was brought home, it was like, oh my gosh, I can communicate more. It's just not at school anymore. And then he like flourished, but they did kind of warn the parents, the SLP, like, hey, this might be a thing that like, yeah, he might be just skyrocketing at school. And then you bring it home and he's going to be like, no, this is a school thing.
Right.
So it's interesting that your cousin is like that.
Yeah. So it just, this like whole topic, this class is very eye-opening in, you know, what students go through and families and administrative to get the voice for all students. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Like, I mean, you always like think about it, but working in a general ed classroom, like, I don't know, I never pictured like the struggles and things like that. Like my cousin, he's almost 2, he was just diagnosed with autism, and they started to pick up that he's not verbalizing much. Like, so he's working with like a speech language pathologist, and she's been working with like a lot of cards and getting him to like make more sounds and recognize words. So I feel like I always relate it back to that when I'm thinking, I'm like, wow, like I wonder if that's what like Jackson's going through. I think it's just like so interesting, but then you don't want to like blab your mouth to your family and be like, oh, this is what I'm learning in class though.
So any other thoughts, or are we good? Okay, well then I'm going to end the discussion.